Let's do this. So what's up, Sam?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So this is, just to give you a quick rundown, this is the No Love Songs Music Business Podcast, where I like to take seriously the idea that a rock band is a business, which I think for a lot of artists is kind of a controversial idea. Some are more comfortable with it than others, but of course, you know, I play in a band. I think everybody in Brooklyn plays in a band at one point or another. But there's a lot of business things that you have to do, from booking shows to putting out your music, which is a kind of a product that you're then trying to sell. You're trying to market. You're trying to build an audience. You're dealing with people all the time, and whether they're in your band or outside of your band, rehearsal spaces, venues. There's a lot of business pieces that are involved. So part of the idea of this podcast was just talking to people who've got experience and trying to share some best practices, because I feel like when you come in, nobody tells you, hey, this is how the business works, right? So I just want to get people's advice and experiences and opinions on this. So before we get into that, though, you have a book.
I do.
And I'd love to hear about it. Can you just give us a quick rundown of what the book's about?
Yes, my elevator pitch. So Bands to BK, it's based on the blog and based largely on interviews that I did over the course of the last 4 years, basically, since I started doing it back in 2018. So like in-person interviews, phone interviews, Zoom interviews, written submissions, and just like all this content I've gathered over the years from musicians, and the result is a guide to Brooklyn by bands. So it's kind of like faces and places of the Brooklyn music scene. And what we've been describing as a guidebook means oral history meets kind of music fan memoir. So like a little bit of like meet me in the bathroom action mixed with like cool spots to go in the borough to like go see shows, drink, hang out in the park, find food, and just experience Brooklyn from the perspective of a musician.
Fantastic. So it's kind of like, it sounds like the blog in book form. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Basically, yeah. And, which made it seem like it was going to be very easy to do. I was like, I've already like done all the work. I've already, have all this material. And it turns out it takes a while to to make a book. No one warned me.
Right.
And COVID was kind of an interesting time to do it as well, because I signed a contract in summer of 2020. So, writing about all these places, or, we're talking to people at these places that at that time we weren't allowed to spend time in, and not knowing what would still be there. But at the same time, it was kind of amazing timing, because people were COVID made us realize how much we care about our favorite spots, how much venues mean to us. And as soon as you lose something, you have this this love for it is so much more apparent. And people were so eager to, when I was getting new material, just talk about these places that meant so much to them. And thankfully, most of them did make it out of the pandemic. So the book is still useful as a guide.
I remember that time. That was a really wild time, of course. And then summer of 2021, things kind of started opening and kind of started to feel normal again. And I think now they just completely feel normal, which is great. But it is good that things survived. And it seems like you're saying, a lot of people realized what they were missing. And I know from meeting musicians, it seems like a lot of bands were formed during the pandemic, and lots of creative juices were flowing, right?
Yeah, I feel like, I was almost busier in terms of writing about music and talking to people, because so many people were writing and putting stuff out. And, I jokingly refer to it as a bandemic, because there are so many projects that came out of this, like Wetsuit, Tilden, 95 Bulls, so many really, really great Brooklyn bands that, were born during this time.
The bandemic.
Bandemic, baby. TM.
It's
the next book.
You do need to trademark that. Yeah, for sure. So you've been doing the blog for about 4 years. How many bands do you think you've talked to?
Oh, fuck. Sorry, can I say that?
Absolutely.
I'm sure hundreds at this point. Artists and bands, and, some no longer live in New York, and then some are still here. And it's just been really cool to also see the momentum that people, the strides that people have made, and to see people grow. I feel very emotionally invested. you're all my children.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I want to hear about that. So I'm curious. You've talked to a couple hundred bands, let's say, and how many of them would you say, just from this music business angle, how many of them think of it as a business? How many of them it's just maybe an art project or a hobby? Like, what would you say? How many of them are sort of upfront about, yeah, we're trying to make it. We're actually trying to make money doing this.
I don't know, because I think first of all, people are hesitant to admit that. I think that seems like something like almost forced that some people view as like, there's different perspectives, right? Because I think some people are like recognize that if like I want to be able to make art full time, and to be able to do that requires a mindset where I have to do this and this and this, and they're on their TikTok or whatever, and they're like have strategies in mind. And then there's some people like bands that I want to I reach out to them because I'm like, this is really good and I want to help you like reach more people. But yeah, I think it just varies by band. I couldn't give you numbers specifically, but it seems like there is definitely like a push and pull between like recognizing what needs to be done and that it is a business, but also like the fact that it sucks because like as an artist, I'm sure like all you want to be able to do is like make your art, and like it sucks that you also have to like be your own like PR person, be your own social media manager, and like send out emails and like make spreadsheets and reach out to venues and like follow up about getting paid and like doing all this stuff. You kind of have to be like a one person or a one band like corporation in a sense.
Yeah, and using those two sides of your brain, right? There's the artistic side, and then there's the business side, and they don't always match up. I know it's a frustrating thing. At our last gig, like I brought T-shirts and then just forgot to announce that we had T-shirts, or the email list, or like all these like business. You're focusing on the performance, right? And so and like that goes great, and you feel good, and then a couple hours later, you're like, oh, I forgot to do this thing that I need to do for the business side. So I think a manager is really valuable for a lot of bands. I know one band in Brooklyn, Violent and Black, that I'm good friends with, they've got a manager, and I think that it works really well for them. And you're a manager as well, right?
I am.
And so can you talk about that side? So and with that hat on, you're focusing on the money side, the business side.
A business hat. Yeah, it's a lot of like spreadsheets and enthusiasm is basically. I manage Mary Shelley. They are a Brooklyn punk band, and the origin story is I saw them at Berlin summer 2021, and I see a shit ton of bands. I go to like 3 or 4 shows a week usually, and I was not familiar with them, and I saw them play, and I was just like, holy shit! I just like I had this like gut feeling. I was like, I need to be a part of this. So I basically like came up to them, accosted them, then bought a book on band management like from Amazon while I was waiting on the train platform for the train to go home. But yeah, I am not personally that business minded either. It's just like I like love writing, and I love like working with people, and I love talking to people. So it's been interesting to switch because I'm like, okay, now I'm doing this on behalf of them rather than on behalf of myself. And there is an element of like, you aren't going to get what you don't ask for, I think. So, it's like working with a venue where if it was myself, that I'd be like, oh yeah, that's fine, cool, yeah, I'm just excited. But, when you're doing it on behalf of a band, on behalf of other people who you are trying to help succeed, then, there is an element of being like, oh, I need to like negotiate and try and like, get them a better deal or a better day, and like be a little pushy, even if it's not in my, or what feels pushy, it's not in my normal nature.
So success in as a musician can mean different things, but I would imagine over these 4 years of talking to bands, you've seen some real success stories. Does anybody really stand out that you want to talk about?
This is like an example I use so frequently, but just because I'm like so excited about it. But just over the course of even like just I think like since like the last year, like seeing Dead Tooth really take off has been amazing. And like Zach is an incredible performer. He's been doing this for a long time in New York, and it's the first thing that comes to mind anytime we talk about like people to be excited about the scene. And when I'm like, if I was going to name bands, and just seeing him play like the Spin Party at Stubbs in Austin during South by Southwest, and like seeing NME just cover his video, and just like witnessing like such an this all of a sudden like amazing momentum he's gaining that's so well deserved, and has been it's just it feels like seeing like people in your community succeed like that is like such a beautiful thing. And so that's just one that comes to mind. Meredith of Workwife is just, incredible. And she is on Born Losers Records. She just was touring with Anthony Green, and like Workwife is like a relatively new project. She's also in Colatura. And so just seeing like her, like all of a sudden just like, again, like so well deserved and working towards it in so many ways for so long, but just like seeing people, I guess it's seeing people from outside New York discover these bands that we get to see all the time and we get to hang out with, and these people that we know, and there's like such a like point of pride, being like just excited for them to be exposed to more people because they're so good, and you see them 3 times a week, or you see them at the Smart at each other's shows, and you see them perform, and they're so good, and It's just like a really cool thing to see recognition from outside of the tri-state area, or even
and on the same token, I'm sure you see lots of bands where you're like, oh, they totally deserve a national audience and they're not getting it necessarily. Can you compare? Is there something that these bands that are making it and getting this national attention are doing differently than the bands who aren't, or is it just kind of random luck?
I'm sure that like getting the right person or the right team behind you is helpful in so many ways. It just increases access. I wish that there was like a formula or something where it's like do this or do that, and like it seems like Gustav, for example, like I know that they've been playing in New York for so long, and I interviewed them for the book. Again, like probably like 2021. Maybe, and then like they're talking about how they like are old in seniors, and how they I think they were like one of the hardest working bands according to Oh My Rockness, like played like 100 shows in a year, and we're playing so much around New York and have been musicians in New York for a long time that all of a sudden now they like were touring with Idols, and now they're touring with Foals, and they're like playing Fashion Week with Celine, and they're like friends with Beck, and it's just like these people who again have been doing this for so long and are so talented. So I don't know exactly what it is, and whether it's just like it's an element of like working your ass off and being incredibly talented, but then you don't know if there's like the magic factor of getting that one person who sees you and is like, oh, I love this, and they're in a position of influence and wants to help, or it's just, I think unfortunately probably so much of it's just like beyond doing the work and being talented and being passionate is just like an element of like fucking luck, right? It's like sure. I think for everything in life, it's just you be prepared and you work hard, and like if you're lucky, like the right thing comes along. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
It's not helpful when you're for telling people what to do.
Right.
Just try really hard.
Try really hard, and maybe the right person will see you. But it sounds like it's also consistency as well, right? Like you're talking about Gustav, and it sounds like they've been playing for a long time and kind of sticking with it. So maybe if you stick it out long enough and don't stop. I mean, I think a lot of bands don't last that long, right? Bands break up all the time. So maybe there's something to be said for consistency. But then also, you mentioned having the right team behind you, right? Is that something somebody like Dead Tooth has? Do they have some management? Do they have some a label, maybe some people behind them?
Yeah, AJ over at Trash Casual, and Trash Casual is incredible. I think he signed, and I don't know exact details, but I know that Dead Tooth has become part of Trash Casual, and AJ is just such a nice guy and so good at what he does and so connected, and I think that has also helped. So it's just having people who believe in you probably, and then who are willing to like also work super hard and that really care, and believe in your project as much as you do. And I would imagine that as an artist too, like that's got to feel so good after doing so much by yourself, but to know that like other people are like, yes, like this is good, and like I believe in you, and I'm going to put my time behind this, and like I want you to succeed as much as you want to succeed. And I imagine that like from beyond like the actual help itself, just like that's got to feel good. We're all human beings, right? We all want the feeling of someone else from being like believing in us. It's a cliche, but it's true.
It seems like for the most part people probably lose money
Yeah.
playing in bands. It's an expensive hobby in a lot of ways, right? Especially if you go on tour. There's a lot of travel costs. I know a lot of touring bands don't make much money. If they get $100 at the end of the night, that's pretty good. And what's that? That's going to cover your food for the next couple of days.
So many of my friends' bands here, who, again, are like, I feel like are like doing like really well, and they like all have jobs,
Right.
at least one job, at least one other job.
Do you know any bands who are totally supporting themselves with their music?
Trying to think. I think at this point, man, I know that's maybe speaks to
Yeah.
maybe that silence as I try and come up with one speaks to the fact that it's not easy to do and it's not common.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the sake of having this platform, I think this is a call to, if you're listening and you're a music fan, like, buy some merch, baby.
Right.
Like, use Bandcamp, support artists, especially on Bandcamp Fridays.
So I think we're coming up to the end of time, and we probably ran out of video already. But is there one? I don't know. Are there like some tips? Like, I know you manage Mary Shelley. Are there some like you see young bands coming up out there? What do they need to do to really, if they got good music, obviously you need that. But beyond that, I mean, what do they need to do to make themselves have more success?
I would say that just like, speaking from experience doing this in New York, I was like, the community really is so strong and so supportive. And I think that really just taking advantage of that, like, there are like, I've a music blog, like there's blogs that like, are doing their thing because they care. So, reaching out to them and just taking advantage of a community that is already like geared to be supportive, and like making friends with other bands. I think like come to see, like, go to shows with bands that you want to play with. It's like, people put together bills so often with like people that they're friends with and like are part of the community. So I think it's such a cliche, and it's like such a lame ass answer probably, but I think like it makes me want to throw up, like, saying the word, but like networking, I think, is like such an important thing. Like, not in like a schmoozy, douchey way, but it's like I think people like naturally in this community like do want to. And maybe it's like a Pollyanna view, but like that's how I feel. It's like I'm doing this because I love it and because I care so much. I think so many people feel the same way, and they want, like, people are geared to want to help. So it's like making friends and just like support, and then in turn supporting them however you can. And it just, again, comes back to like kind of the reciprocal elements I noted earlier. And I think just like, get out there and meet people and foster relationships.
Yeah, and connect, and people want to connect, right?
Absolutely.
And like you said, but it's funny you don't want to use the word network.
I know it's that business. This is a business podcast. I should.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. I think that's really common. And you mentioned before too how, even bands, if they want to make money, they don't want to admit that. What do you think? What do you think that is? Why is that such a, like, why is making money this almost dirty word in this artist community? Any thoughts?
I don't know. Maybe because it's just what it's associated with. It's just like, you think about like money, you think of like the man. I don't know, or like corporations selling out, or maybe it's the idea. I think people are even often frequently like hesitant to label themselves, like, or people have a very strict definition, I think, often of what they think being an artist is, and sometimes the idea of money is in conflict with this idea they have, much like people feel often like they can't have a day job because then they're not a real artist, if they aren't supporting themselves by just their art. But it's like, if you make art, you are an artist, and I think it's loosening up, the restrictions around that. After doing this for several years and like working with artists, and like, which I generally like is my passion, is like supporting artists like that, in various forms. Like, that's what I care about more than anything. And when I had my book event, like, seeing people come out, for me, it was like a really emotional and incredibly, like, I know, I was like, just again so touched by that, and like just the power of this community in New York specifically is just incredible, and we're very lucky to have it. But
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great note to
Yeah,
end on.
before I cry.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sam. It was great
Yes.
talking with you. All right.
Bye.